Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into territory even the bravest Victorians tiptoed around. Queen Victoria's personal hygiene. This is the story of a woman with 9 children, a global empire, and absolutely zero awareness of what a loofah is. And tonight, you're about to discover that her approach to self-care was basically ignore everything and hope the maids sort it out. So before you get cozy, please take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of soothing, ridiculous history. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I read everyone, usually while soaking in a bubble bath, which is something Queen Victoria definitely never got to experience. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that gentle white noise, grab your softest blanket and settle in. Maybe double check that your sheets are clean, just to feel smug. Tonight, you'll want all the comfort you can get. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered how a woman with an empire at her feet handled basic hygiene? Was there Victorian shampoo? Or did they just whisper prayers into a bowl of rainwater and hope for the best? Why did she think deodorant was witchcraft? Could you get through brushing her hair without accidentally discovering a sentient ecosystem living in there? And would you survive a day with her personal cleaning routine? Or would you end up begging for hand sanitizer and therapy? Congratulations! You've just woken up in Buckingham Palace. The year is 1861, and you are Queen Victoria's personal attendant. You have a comb in one hand, a bar of suspiciously grey soap in the other, and no idea what you're about to smell. Good luck. You awaken at dawn, greeted by the distant chimes of palace clocks and the not-so-distant reality of damp, drafty Victorian bedrooms. Your job? Gently wake Her Majesty, ideally without startling her into wielding the royal scepter like a fly swatter. The room smells faintly of roses and much more strongly of Victorian bedroom. Congratulations, you're already questioning your life choices. Let's set the scene. The first rays of greyish London sunlight struggle through heavy drapes, landing on a room that looks fit for an empress, but feels, frankly, like a moderately haunted linen closet. The fireplace is cold, the air is colder, and the carpets do that mysterious Victorian thing where they seem to absorb moisture straight from the air, no matter the season. It's clammy. It's stately. It's a 5-star hotel if the stars are made of mildew. Your feet hit the floor with a muffled thud, landing on a rug so thick it could easily conceal several royal secrets, or at least the missing page from Prince Albert's diary. The furniture looms around you, polished mahogany, velvet chairs, a dressing table weighed down by an alarming number of mysterious bottles and brushes, and over in the enormous canopied bed, Queen Victoria herself is somewhere beneath a mountain of lace, wool, and the sort of blankets that weigh as much as a healthy child. Here's the tricky part. Victorian etiquette says you cannot speak to the Queen first, unless she speaks to you. But you also can't just stand at the foot of the bed humming God Save the Queen until she stirs. You try a subtle approach, a gentle shuffle of the chamber pot, a well-timed cough, a soft clatter of the breakfast tray. Anything louder, and she might assume you're a French assassin or, worse, a member of the press. The Queen's first moments of consciousness are legendary for their unpredictability. Sometimes she wakes up cheerfully, ready to greet the day and discuss her dreams, almost always featuring horses, ministers, or existential dread. Other days, she sits bolt upright, looking for all the world like she's about to declare war on Prussia or on whoever left a draft in the room. You quickly learn to gauge the mood by her first royal grunt. Is it the low, throaty of minor displeasure, or the sharp, offended half of someone who suspects her slippers have been moved half an inch to the left? This is the real test of your service. Next, you prepare to raise the blinds. Gently. Direct sunlight is the enemy. Too much and you risk a royal squint. Too little and the Queen will accuse you of plotting to keep her in the dark like a common Russian Tsar. As the light seeps in, the dust motes begin their morning ballet. You pray she won't notice the one cobweb up by the moulding. Spoiler, She always does. The Queen's wake-up routine involves a prescribed sequence of events that must be followed exactly. First, you must present the royal slippers. Warmed, but not too warm. One unfortunate footman once singed them near the fire and was reassigned to cold bucket duty for a month. Then, the ceremonial morning beverage. Queen Victoria, in a fit of royal relatability, prefers strong black tea laced with enough sugar to make her dentist weep. The cup must be spotless, the saucer perfectly aligned, and the teaspoon facing north. Or maybe it's east. It changes depending on whether the Queen had cheese for dinner. Meanwhile, the background symphony of palace life begins to rise. Footmen clatter outside, a maid rushes past whispering about lost hairpins, and somewhere down the corridor, a corgi is attempting to liberate itself from a decorative ribbon. The Queen herself sighs, stretches, and sits up with imperial gravity. Your job is to help her don the first layer of the day, a starched, spotlessly white linen chemise. This is easier said than done, as it involves negotiating with lace, buttons, and the Queen's personal vendetta against drafts. The room never truly smells clean. No matter how many rose sachets and lavender sprigs you scatter, the underlying aroma of old wool, human effort, and coal smoke clings to everything. You briefly contemplate what Febreze would fetch on the Victorian black market. With the Queen's feet snug in her slippers, teacup in hand, and the first rays of light cautiously admitted, you have successfully navigated the morning gauntlet. Only 20 more hours of royal hygiene rituals to go, and as you tiptoe away, you wonder, did I remember to warm the water for her face? Did I check for spiders in the bloomers? Am I still dreaming, or is this just what history smells like? Welcome to a typical royal morning. Cold, fragrant, complicated, and a little bit dangerous. You survived. For now, before you can start the day, you take stock of the royal mattress. A dense, lumpy fortress stuffed with horsehair, feathers, and, let's be honest, several centuries of British bacteria. Changing the sheets is a ceremonial event, and washing them? Well, it's a rare, heroic feat worthy of a national holiday. Let's be clear. Sleeping arrangements in Buckingham Palace are less sleep hygiene and more epidemiology experiment. The royal bed is enormous, wider than a railway car, and tall enough to require a running start. 4 thick, carved posts loom at the corners, draped in velvet curtains that look regal but function mainly as dust magnets. These curtains haven't seen the inside of a washtub since Napoleon was a problem. Each fold contains enough dust to qualify as its own peer of the realm. You stand beside the bed, staring at the top blanket, a quilt so heavy you wonder if it's been filled with lead for security reasons. Lifting it requires upper body strength. Beneath that, a parade of sheets, each more intimidating than the last. The top sheet is crisp linen, the colour of week-old snow. The second sheet is made of flannel, so itchy you suspect it was woven from regrets. The final layer is the mattress cover, a faded tapestry featuring a scene of Queen Elizabeth I, who probably slept on it herself. Then, the mattress itself. Forget memory foam. The only thing these mattresses remember is every royal who's ever tossed, turned, or dropped crumbs in their sleep. The stuffing is a unique Victorian blend of horsehair, feathers, and whatever was left in the broom closet at the end of the year. The result? A surface that is simultaneously lumpy, springy, and mysteriously crunchy in places. Every time you move, it releases a gentle sigh of dust and a faint whiff of historical flavour. Changing the royal bedding is not a daily event. In fact, it's so rare the palace keeps a special bell for the occasion, rung only when an unfortunate maid draws the short straw. You begin by peeling off each layer, shaking it gently, well, as gently as you can while wearing a full crinoline and trying not to inhale whatever emerges. The sheets are dragged through the corridors, gathering curious glances and perhaps a few sympathetic nods from other servants. These linens are then boiled, pounded with lye, and finally hung out to dry in the fog. where they acquire that signature British fresh air aroma, halfway between morning dew and lingering coal smoke. Now, let's address the bed's true inhabitants, the Victorian microfauna. Every respectable mattress is home to a lively ecosystem of dust mites, lice, and, if the season is right, a family of ambitious bedbugs. This is not discussed in polite society. Instead, an extra layer of bedding is thrown on top, and the royal nose is deployed for strategic, selective breathing. The phrase "don't let the bedbugs bite" is less a lullaby and more a sincere nightly prayer. In case you're imagining the Queen resting on a pile of clean white clouds, think again. After weeks of royal occupancy, the sheets develop their own topography. Hills of bunched fabric, mysterious damp patches, and occasional feather eruptions. If you've ever woken up impaled by a quill, you know you're living the Victorian dream. Why not wash the sheets more often, you ask? Because it's a monumental task. Water must be fetched, kettles boiled, lye measured, arms flexed, and maids rallied like a Napoleonic army. Each wash shortens the life of the linen, so thrift says, don't clean what you can perfume. Enter lavender sachets, rose petals, and, when all else fails, a prayer to Saint Hygiene, who almost certainly died of disappointment. Modern sleep experts recommend a cool, clean environment and fresh sheets. The Victorians recommend wearing a nightcap, several layers of flannel, and accepting that you will wake up smelling like a cross between a horse stable and a flower shop. The real marvel is that anyone slept at all. So tonight, as you nestle into your memory foam or crisp cotton, remember, the Victorians survived centuries of mattress mayhem with little more than determination and a strong immune system. And if you ever complain about changing your duvet cover, just imagine wrangling a blanket the size of a circus tent in a room full of judgmental portraits. Sleep tight, and may your dreams be less itchy than Her Majesty's. Morning routines start with a quick splash of cold water, which is believed to invigorate the royal complexion and possibly terrify the germs into hiding. Soap is optional. If you're hoping for exfoliation, the Victorian method is to simply wait for nature to do its flaky work. As you approach the royal washstand, you're greeted by the sight of a porcelain basin perched atop a mahogany table, flanked by pitchers of yesterday's water and a pile of embroidered hand towels that exist mostly for decorative purposes. The water itself is icy, having spent the night getting intimately acquainted with the palace's drafty corridors. You dip your fingers in and suddenly understand why Queen Victoria could look so stern before breakfast. Nothing prepares you for the shock of 45-degree water at 6 a.m. The sound that escapes your lips is somewhere between a gasp and a diplomatic incident. Soap, you'll notice, is nowhere to be seen. It's not that it doesn't exist, but rather it's reserved for special occasions such as royal visits, bouts of visible dirt, or the accidental spillage of jam on one's chin. Most days, the Queen's face is cleansed with nothing but cold water and sheer willpower. Cleansing was believed to be more about balance than banishing every speck of grime. After all, the Victorians firmly believed that washing too often opened the pores, letting in deadly miasmas, bad humours, and possibly the ghost of Oliver Cromwell. Exfoliation is accomplished through patience and denial. There are no jars of apricot scrub, no loofahs, and certainly no facial peels. Instead, the skin is allowed to flake gently over the course of the week, giving a regal, distressed fresco effect that would look right at home in a slightly mildewed Italian church. If a royal patch of dry skin becomes too dramatic, a dab of cold cream or goose fat will suffice, provided you don't mind spending the day smelling faintly like a Victorian cookhouse. Next comes the face towel, which has been air-dried to the exact texture of a Brillo pad. You dab, pat, or, if feeling especially brave, scrub your cheeks, all while the palace's parade of portraits watches with a look that says, "Just be glad you weren't born during the plague." Moisturizer, as a concept, is still decades away. For now, you simply hope the English climate will provide the necessary humidity, and if not, Well, a stiff upper lip does wonders for hiding chapped skin. Eyebrows are gently tamed with a moistened fingertip. No brow gel, no tweezers, just a prayer that Queen Victoria never hears of Instagram. If you're looking for a hint of colour, you can pinch your cheeks vigorously, or for special events, dab on a little beet juice and pretend you're not actively fermenting. Personal hygiene is performed in a haze of lavender water and rose-scented vinegar, spritzed on with the frequency of a modern-day facial mist, but with about 1/10 the cleaning power. The Queen's attendants will sometimes waft the scented handkerchiefs around her face, not so much to purify the air as to keep up morale. Perfume is a vital step. It doesn't actually clean anything, but it reassures everyone that effort has been made. If you think about it, the royal visage is less a face and more a monument to Victorian minimalism. There's no serum, no sunscreen, and certainly no 10-step routine. Instead, the Queen's morning glow comes courtesy of brisk air, hard water, and the relentless optimism that the British climate is its own form of exfoliation. Now, compare that to your own morning ritual. Face wash, toner, serum, moisturizer, sunscreen, maybe a jade roller for good luck. By the time you finish, Queen Victoria has already eaten breakfast and read a dozen letters. She might not be dewy, but she's efficient. So as you go about your day, just remember, the face that launched 1,000 ships and a few unfortunate imperial policies started every morning with a brisk slap of water and the hope that nobody looked too closely. Royal skin may not have glowed, but it definitely survived. And in Victorian England, survival was always in style. Dental hygiene is a thrilling adventure involving bristly brushes, mysterious powders, and a distinct lack of toothpaste as we know it. If you've ever tried brushing with salt, charcoal, or old chalk, congratulations, you're halfway to Victorian royalty. Let's begin your royal morning. Standing in front of the Queen's dressing table, surveying the arsenal of 19th century dental technology, here sits a small glass jar labelled dentifrice, which, if you open it, reveals a powder the colour of week-old snow and the texture of industrial-grade sand. Next to it, an ivory-handled toothbrush with bristles so stiff they double as a disciplinary tool for unruly corgis. There's no tube of minty gel in sight, just tiny tins and a faint aura of desperation. Queen Victoria's morning dental ritual is not for the faint of heart. You dip the brush in water, shake off the excess onto a towel that's seen better centuries, and then stab it into the jar of powder. The powder is a secret blend, mostly ground chalk, with some added salt for scrubbing, maybe a pinch of dried mint if you're lucky, and just enough charcoal to stain your nightgown if you sneeze. The taste? Imagine licking a piece of sidewalk chalk while someone throws seawater in your face. Refreshing. You begin to brush, and immediately understand why Victorians were famous for their stiff upper lips. They needed them to hold in the wincing. Each pass of the bristles feels like you're exfoliating your gums into next Tuesday. If you thought a modern dentist's cleaning was uncomfortable, try this. No gentle rotation, no ergonomic handle, just a rapid, frantic scrubbing, as if trying to erase all evidence of last night's mutton pie. Toothpaste as we know it simply doesn't exist yet. Early recipes for homemade pastes included things like crushed eggshells, soot, and honey. Some royal recipes even called for dragon's blood. Spoiler, just red resin from a tree, not a pet kept in the Tower of London. The goal was simple. Make your teeth look as white as possible, or at least as white as everyone else's. If you happen to lose a tooth in the process, well, at least you're not alone. The royal dentist moonlights as the palace's amateur barber surgeon, always ready with pliers in case a molar decides to rebel. And let's talk about the breath. Mint as a flavouring is a rare luxury, mostly reserved for the wealthy and ambitious. Instead, the Victorians mask bad breath with clove oil, parsley, or, if all else fails, strong tea and even stronger denial. It's a constant battle against the aromas of last night's dinner, the local Thames, and the inside of your own mouth. Kissing, while technically allowed, is best left to the imagination or done at a respectful distance, say, the length of a cricket bat. Still, the Queen's commitment to oral care is admirable. Toothbrushing, even in this rudimentary form, is a sign of refinement. While many Victorians still rely on chewing sticks, twigs, or even bits of linen for cleaning, you are wielding an imported brush with the same determined energy as a royal decree. Every morning, every night, the bristles go to work, scraping away plaque, doubts, and any notion that the Victorian era was glamorous up close. Cavities are rampant. Gums are often as inflamed as diplomatic relations with France. Toothaches are a regular occurrence, and the only thing more feared than an abscess is the person responsible for yanking it out. The cure? Swish with brandy, pray, and then sit very still while a gentleman in a bloody apron removes the problem. The Queen herself reportedly preferred to endure the pain rather than risk a barber's forceps, proof that even absolute monarchs draw the line at amateur dental surgery. But despite all of this, there's something comforting about the daily ritual. The sound of bristles against enamel, the fresh, if slightly salty, taste lingering in your mouth, the sense of having done your hygienic duty. You finish with a final rinse, spitting discreetly into a china bowl, pat your lips dry, and give yourself a regal, gap-toothed smile in the mirror. Congratulations, your teeth may not sparkle, but you've survived another round of Victorian dental roulette. And as you step out to greet the day, remember, you are only ever one royal breakfast away from a new cavity and an emergency appointment with the most terrifying man in the palace. Smile wide, if you dare. The concept of a daily shower is as foreign to Queen Victoria as TikTok. Instead, a full bath is a planned, supervised ordeal involving heated buckets, much gossip, and the ever-present risk of pneumonia. The royal physician is standing by in case of sudden cleanliness. You might picture Victorian royalty lounging in marble tubs, but the reality is a bit more public spectacle than private spa. Bathing is scheduled weeks in advance, usually after a particularly sticky summer, a medical consultation, or when the Queen's ladies-in-waiting begin to quietly lose consciousness. There's an air of anticipation about bath day, as if the palace were about to host the Derby, except with more towels and fewer horses. The morning of the big event, the palace halls buzz with frantic activity. Teams of servants are dispatched to fetch water, by the bucketful, from cisterns and kitchen boilers, and every stairwell soon echoes with the desperate sloshing of soon-to-be lukewarm water. The royal bath itself is less a tub and more a large, portable barrel lined with linen sheets and surrounded by a fortress of screens for privacy. A smaller army of attendants is on standby, clutching flannels, soap, and enough towels to reupholster Windsor Castle. Temperature is everything. The water must be not too hot, not too cold, or Queen Victoria will make her displeasure known in tones that could curdle fresh cream. The servants hover with kettles and ladles, making endless adjustments and running through their annual supply of apologies. By the time the temperature is declared adequate, everyone in the room is sweating except for the Queen, who is seated nearby, reading correspondence and pretending not to notice the chaos. The bath itself is not a solitary affair. Queen Victoria, for all her power, is surrounded by a battalion of helpers, each with a designated job. There's a lady for sleeves, a lady for soap, another for rinsing, and at least one more just to fetch things that have been left across the room. The Queen herself is expected to remain dignified at all times, which is difficult when your knees are sticking out of a wooden tub and your hair is being aggressively detangled by someone who's already late for supper. Soap is applied sparingly, with the sort of reverence usually reserved for holy relics. Victorian soap is harsh, often a chunky homemade brick of lye, animal fat, and the faintest suggestion of lavender if you're feeling festive. It stings the eyes, dries the skin, and leaves you cleaner, yes, but also possibly wishing for a new layer of epidermis. Scrubbing is conducted with flannels so rough you'd be forgiven for thinking they were designed by the same people who made the nation's roadways. Conversation fills the awkward silences. The latest gossip from Balmoral, reports of ministers misbehaving, or dire warnings about the dangers of overbathing. According to the era's leading medical men, excessive washing could weaken the constitution and invite untold illness. The royal physician stands guard like a lifeguard at a pool, ready to administer brandy and smelling salts if the Queen's pulse dares to flutter. Some even recommend the half bath, a ritual in which only the arms and face are submerged, leaving the rest of the body heroically untouched by soap or water. Once the washing is finished, a scramble ensues as the Queen is lifted from the tub, shrouded in towels, and whisked away to warmer quarters before she can catch a chill and trigger a week-long national crisis. The bathwater, now a murky broth, is discreetly disposed of, ideally without anyone important seeing what's been left behind. Afterward, the Queen enjoys a cup of strong tea, her skin pink and slightly offended, while her ladies-in-waiting exchange exhausted looks and pray that next year's bath can be rescheduled. And so, in the rare moments when history's most powerful woman feels truly clean, it's thanks not to luxury or excess, but to an army of servants, a suspicious doctor, and the stubborn endurance of everyone involved. Next time you turn on your hot shower, remember, for Queen Victoria, cleanliness was less about comfort and more about surviving the ordeal. And of course, making sure everyone in the palace had something to talk about until the next annual event. When there isn't time for a proper bath, meaning every day but one, it's time for the classic Victorian sponge bath. A small bowl of water, a scratchy flannel, and just enough dabbing to say you tried. Please don't ask about armpits. Let's set the scene. It's a chilly London morning. Queen Victoria is seated at her dressing table, surrounded by attendants armed with various implements of hygiene, a porcelain basin with about 2 cups of lukewarm water, a flannel cloth that could double as sandpaper, and a selection of dainty towels with embroidered monograms, all of which are destined to remain suspiciously dry. You, the trusted royal attendant, approach with the bowl and flannel, trying to appear cheerful. The Queen does not look amused. The water, having travelled up several flights of palace stairs and through 2 layers of bureaucracy, is already cold. You add a drop of rose water, as is customary, in hopes it will mask the other, less regal, aromas wafting about. Victorian sponge baths are not about getting clean so much as giving the impression that you are not actively decomposing. The process is more performance art than hygiene. There is a sequence, and it must be followed precisely. First, the face, dabbed lightly, as if you are brushing dew off a priceless painting. Next, the neck, which receives slightly more attention, because even a queen cannot rule if her pearls get stuck to her skin. Then, we enter the realm of polite mystery. The flannel is dabbed at the hands, wrists, and, on very ambitious days, the elbows. Any further would risk scandal. Victorian sensibilities demand that all areas below the collarbone and above the ankle remain as mysterious as the plot of a Russian novel. The underarms, for example, are given only the briefest acknowledgement. Perhaps a quick swipe if the Queen is feeling particularly modern. Otherwise, a delicate powder and a prayer will have to do. Feet are another question altogether. Socks are removed with a grimace. The bowl is refreshed, because even Queen Victoria draws the line at using facial water on her toes. Each foot is freshened with a quick pass of the damp flannel, accompanied by a look of regal resignation. No one mentions that royal shoes are, by this point, doing most of the heavy lifting in the battle against odor. By the time you've finished, the water is cloudy, the flannel is heroic, and the Queen looks exactly as she did when you started. The goal is not to achieve cleanliness as we know it today, but to ward off the more alarming signs of visible dirt and reassure everyone that Her Majesty is presentable. If you're feeling bold, you might suggest a fresh chemise. If not, you simply fluff the petticoats and hope for a strong breeze. Personal fragrance is the true secret weapon. Lavender water, rose vinegar, and the occasional splash of Odor cologne are liberally applied, not just to the Queen, but to anyone who has spent more than 5 minutes in her presence. The scent cloud follows her through the palace, overwhelming the competition from coal fires, boiled cabbage, and anything growing in the royal boots. As you pack away the implements of hygiene, you realize that the real art of the Victorian sponge bath isn't in the washing but in the performance. A dab here, a dab there, a whispered promise that tomorrow's water will be warmer. The Queen's dignity is preserved, her skin is only marginally damp, and the court can continue its day under the illusion that all is fresh and fragrant. Meanwhile, you quietly salute modern plumbing and antibacterial soap, and as Queen Victoria glides away to breakfast, leaving only the faintest whiff of rosewater and determination behind, you make a mental note. No matter how strange your own morning routine may seem, it has nothing on the glorious theatre of the royal sponge bath. Queen Victoria's hair, thick, regal, and not washed nearly as often as you'd hope, requires hours of brushing. The process is part beauty ritual, part upper arm workout, and part archaeological dig for hairpins last seen at Prince Albert's wedding. Let's begin. It's early morning in Buckingham Palace. Sunlight struggles through the foggy London air, glinting off silver-backed brushes, tortoiseshell combs, and a small army of glass jars containing mysterious unguents. The Queen sits before her dressing mirror, swaddled in layers of lace, looking for all the world like someone about to face a firing squad rather than a simple hairbrush. As her trusted attendant, your mission is both sacred and perilous. Step 1. Removal of the nightcap, revealing a majestic mane of hair, arranged in the sort of loose historical bun that says, "I have seen things." Queen Victoria's hair is famous throughout the empire, not for its effortless elegance, but for its ability to resist every known comb and, possibly, all British law. Victorian wisdom insists that frequent washing is dangerous. Wet hair invites chills and scandal, the royal physicians warn. So actual shampooing is a quarterly event, scheduled with the same enthusiasm as dental surgery. The rest of the time, cleanliness is achieved through dry cleaning, an industrious routine of combing, brushing, and the liberal use of hair powders. This means every brushing session starts with a canvas that could easily host a wildlife documentary. You select the largest, sturdiest brush, bore bristles naturally, and prepare for battle. The first pass is tentative, gliding over the outermost layers to collect dust and whatever the Queen's corgis left behind last night. Each stroke releases a faint cloud of powder and the unmistakable aroma of violets, rosewater, and whatever was on the dinner menu 3 nights ago. Now, onto the detangling. Queen Victoria's hair is not so much tangled as it is fortified. Here you'll find knots, hairpins, and, if you're lucky, a stray button or two. Occasionally, you'll encounter a ribbon from the 1840s or, legend has it, the lost earring of a Russian ambassador. Extraction requires patience, diplomacy, and the muscle tone of a seasoned blacksmith. Each hairpin removed is placed reverently in a small porcelain bowl. The Queen herself may glance over, tallying the number, her lips pursed in mild royal suspicion. "Are you quite certain that's all?" Brushing takes time, at least 100 strokes, as prescribed by Victorian beauty manuals. This is meant to distribute the natural oils from scalp to tip, bestowing a glossy sheen and keeping the hair healthy, or at least less likely to stand up and file for independence. You alternate between brush and comb, switching arms every 10 minutes to avoid muscle fatigue. Halfway through, you understand why royal portraits usually feature the Queen in elaborate bonnets. Hats hide a multitude of historical sins. The Queen is stoic, occasionally issuing instructions or recounting some minor political scandal from the previous evening. Her patience is impressive, especially considering that a vigorous session with the hairbrush is not unlike participating in an arm wrestling contest with an octopus. The bristles catch, the comb snags, and you both soldier on, bound by duty, ritual, and the faint hope that this is the day you finally find the missing emerald hairpin. If the weather is particularly damp, a light dusting of rice powder is worked into the roots to absorb any errant oil. Hair oils, pomades, and even bear's grease are sometimes added to lend shine, though the effect is more Victorian candle than runway model. When the process is complete, the Queen's hair gleams in the morning light, expertly arranged and ready for the weight of crown, tiara, or one of several thousand official bonnets. By the end, your arms ache, your respect for professional hairdressers has quadrupled, and the Queen's mane is restored to its imperial glory. You've survived another morning at court, with only a handful of broken pins and your dignity slightly intact. As you sweep the last stray hairs into a silver dish, you realize this is not just grooming, it's tradition, ceremony, and a testament to the stubbornness of both royal hair and the people tasked with taming it. If you ever doubt the endurance of the British monarchy, just remember, they survived centuries of this. And so did you, mostly. Natural hair not looking its best? No problem. It's time for Victorian hair oils, pomatums, and powders that promise shine, but deliver a look somewhere between damp spaniel and accident at a candle factory. Let's be honest. Even Queen Victoria has her bad hair days. And in the age before dry shampoo and volumizing mousse, options are limited. The answer to limp, lifeless locks, or frankly, to hair that has survived 3 weeks between washes and a particularly scandalous garden party, is to slather, dust, or simply cover the problem and hope for the best. The royal dressing table is a chemist's playground. Here you'll find bottles of Macassar oil, the source of those notorious anti-Macassar cloths draped over every respectable armchair, little pots of sticky pomatum, tins of rice powder, and occasionally a suspiciously hairy hairpiece lurking among the hairpins. As the Queen's attendant, you must master the careful balance of application. Too little, and the hair remains lackluster. Too much, and the Queen looks like she's been attacked by a buttery ferret. Start with Macassar oil, a Victorian staple. It promises a brilliant shine, but its true gift is its ability to transfer itself onto every surface within a 2-meter radius. You warm a little oil between your palms and begin working it through the Queen's hair, careful not to let it drip onto the royal shoulders or, worse, the priceless silk upholstery. The smell is intense, floral, spicy, and slightly medicinal, like a haunted apothecary. Instantly, the hair transforms. Once dull strands now glisten in the candlelight, and so does everything else in the room. Next comes pomatum, a concoction of bear grease, beeswax, and perfumed oils. This isn't just for shine, it's for hold. The effect is somewhat sculptural. You scoop out a fingerful, softening it between your hands, and then apply it with the gravity of a medieval mason patching the Tower of London. Pomatum gives the Queen's hair a certain stubbornness, allowing elaborate styles to withstand the rigors of wind, rain, and the occasional emotional outburst. Unfortunately, it also attracts dust, flower petals, and at least one curious palace mouse. When the hair looks a little too shiny, or if the air in London has taken a turn for the steamed pudding, you reach for the rice powder. This gets dusted liberally along the part and through the roots, leaving a faint, ghostly pallor and a subtle crunch when you run your fingers through. If you overdo it, the Queen may resemble a member of the French court, circa 1789, or a well-floured biscuit. If you underdo it, the hair clings in heavy ropes and threatens to slide right off her head if the palace gets too warm. But what if all else fails? Enter the wig, a Victorian backup plan with centuries of history. While Queen Victoria herself was not a habitual wig wearer, hairpieces, pads and rats, bundles of saved hair used for added volume, are always on standby. They're carefully styled and pinned into place, sometimes so convincingly that even the Queen forgets which part is her own and which is imported from a slightly less fortunate lady-in-waiting. Wigs and pads are dusted with more powder and scented with lavender to keep things fresh, at least by contemporary standards. The final look? Somewhere between royal glamour and escaped waxwork. It holds up for hours, unless you're caught in the rain or startled by a foreign ambassador, in which case all bets are off. The scent lingers in the air long after the Queen has left the room, a blend of oil, powder, beeswax, and hope. As you clean the brushes, wipe the greasy fingerprints from the porcelain combs, and discreetly shake the powder from your own sleeves. you realize that Victorian hair care is less about looking perfect and more about managing expectations. You can't outshine modern shampoo, but you can always add a little more oil and pretend it's intentional. So if your hair ever misbehaves, spare a thought for those who lived through the era of pomatum and powder, where shine was king and grease was inevitable. In the Victorian world, a good hair day was any day you made it through breakfast without your fringe catching fire or your wig sliding sideways. And for Queen Victoria, that was more than enough. The concept of deodorant hasn't arrived yet, but the need certainly has. Queen Victoria, like everyone else, relies on perfumes, lavender sachets, and the desperate hope that no one comes too close on a warm day. Let's be clear, the air in a Victorian palace is less light floral mist and more overripe greenhouse. Hygiene, as we know it, is a distant dream, and even royalty is not immune to the realities of human biology. There are no roll-ons, no sprays, no invisible solids, just natural odors, wafting through layers of wool, silk, and very determined optimism. Queen Victoria starts her day by tucking a lavender sachet into her bodice, a tiny, fragrant satchel meant to mask whatever the rest of the morning might bring. The scent is pleasant at first, and so strong that even the royal corgis occasionally sneeze. Sachets are changed as often as outfits. In summer, this can mean 3 or 4 times a day, as the bouquet of palace life shifts from Odor linen closet to spiced damp wool. But let's not forget the main line of defense, perfume. The Queen's dressing table overflows with glass bottles, each promising a different floral fantasy: violet, rose, orange blossom, or, in moments of true crisis, a powerful musk that can stun small rodents at 20 paces. Application is strategic. A few dabs to the wrists, behind the ears, and crucially, down the front of the dress, where the real action happens. The idea is to create a pleasant cloud around Her Majesty, a sort of olfactory force field, before she ventures out into the world of ministers, courtiers, and public engagements. Of course, there are limitations. Victorian perfume is mostly made with alcohol, herbs, and flower oils, but as the hours wear on, body heat turns those bright top notes into something altogether earthier. And with daily baths mostly a rumour, the day's events tend to accumulate under the arms, behind the knees, and, inevitably, somewhere just above the royal waistband. The best anyone can do is keep moving and hope for a good cross breeze. Attendants are sworn to discretion, but everyone has their tricks. Lemon slices dabbed on the wrists, camphor balls tucked into pockets, and, for the truly desperate, a quick dash of vinegar water wiped over the décolletage. It stings, but it works, briefly. If you're really in trouble, the final solution is to air out the Queen's dresses by hanging them in a breezy corridor and sending a silent prayer to Saint Scentless. None of this is foolproof. On a warm day, after a long carriage ride or an extended session of courtly handshaking, the perfumes surrender and the sachets are overpowered. Victorian etiquette comes to the rescue. A proper lady, or monarch, maintains a polite distance. Hugs are replaced by delicate nods, and group photos are taken with everyone spaced just so. There's a reason Victorian dance cards were so popular. You needed a written record of who got too close. What about underarm care? The armpit is a tricky diplomatic zone. Powder is the weapon of choice. Attendants dust it liberally, trying to soak up moisture before it seeps through 6 layers of linen. The Queen's personal favourite, rose-scented talc. It gives a faint, rosy glow and only leaves minor chalky streaks on the royal gown. If all else fails, there is always the handkerchief, delicately pressed to the brow or, with surprising subtlety, dabbed beneath the arms during moments of royal distraction. You, as the loyal attendant, learn to recognize the signs. A quick fanning of the bodice? Time to refresh the sachet. A request for just a bit more cologne? Bring out the heavy artillery. And on those rare, sweltering afternoons when nothing seems to work, you simply keep your composure and stand slightly upwind. So, Next time you reach for your antiperspirant or marvel at the luxury of a midday shower, remember Queen Victoria and her fragrant arsenal. The Victorian era was an age of progress and invention, but when it came to body odor, it was every monarch for themselves. In the absence of modern science, sometimes all you can do is layer, spritz, and hope for rain. It's time for a visit to the royal commode, a splendid, wood-panelled marvel that is emptied by someone who is definitely underpaid. Toilet paper, as a concept, is still in beta. Instead, lace handkerchiefs, newspaper, or if you're truly unlucky, yesterday's court circular. Let's pull back the velvet curtain on the least glamorous aspect of palace life, the Victorian bathroom. Forget sparkling white porcelain or a pleasant scented candle. In Queen Victoria's world, the royal privy is equal parts status symbol, logistical challenge, and a test of personal courage. Nestled in a discreet corner of Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle, you'll find a chair that looks suspiciously like it belongs in the drawing room, except for a carefully disguised lid and an ominous sense of purpose. Entering the privy means navigating a maze of etiquette. You never ever say the words toilet, potty, or anything so vulgar in front of the Queen. Euphemisms abound, retiring, withdrawing, or for the more literary, going to attend to one's correspondence. You, as the royal attendant, have to anticipate these delicate requests, sometimes before the Queen herself admits them. If Her Majesty coughs and glances vaguely at the hallway, it's your cue to ready the facilities. The commode itself is a sturdy, wood-panelled chair with a removable chamber pot inside. Lined with porcelain or tin, it's emptied by the palace knight soilmen, individuals whose job description would make even the most intrepid Victorian explorer wince. Each morning the commodes are whisked away, scoured with lye and vinegar, and returned smelling of faintly sour lavender. Occasionally, if the Queen is in residence at Balmoral, the cleaning happens outdoors, which means the local wildlife gets a glimpse into the highest reaches of British society. Privacy is paramount, but never absolute. The privy is shielded by a screen or, in moments of true luxury, a full dressing room. You, the attendant, stand discreetly out of earshot, praying no one decides to have a conversation through the door. Sounds echo in those marble corridors. Nothing says regal embarrassment like a courtier passing by at the wrong moment. And then, the question of toilet paper. Simply put, there isn't any, at least not as we know it. Lace handkerchiefs, often embroidered with the royal cipher, are on hand for special occasions, but more often it's scraps of old newspaper or torn-up court circulars. The most unfortunate option is a reused bit of last week's Times, with yesterday's political scandal pressed into service. Softness is not a feature. You get texture, historical context, and the faintest whiff of ink. Victorian plumbing is a marvel when it works, which is to say, rarely. Some palaces experiment with water closets, elaborate contraptions of levers, pull chains, and cisterns perched high above. The result? A powerful, gravity-fed flush that occasionally soaks the user and always frightens the corgis. If you're lucky, it all ends with a satisfying gurgle. If not, someone has to fetch the plumber, who arrives 3 hours late and leaves muttering about the curse of royal pipes. Washing up is a ritual in itself. A porcelain ewer and basin are ready nearby, filled with cool water and a bar of harsh, medicinal soap. There's no running water, and you're unlikely to leave the privy feeling refreshed. Instead, you pat your hands with a towel and apply a little cologne, hoping it's enough to erase any suspicion of what just transpired. If all goes well, no one is the wiser. But the occasional slip is inevitable. A lost handkerchief, a stuck chamber pot, or a plumbing mishap can become the talk of the servants' hall for weeks. The Queen herself is above comment, but even she has been known to sigh dramatically when the flush misfires and summon a footman with the air of a woman demanding a new empire. So the next time you enjoy the luxury of toilet paper and indoor plumbing, think of Queen Victoria and her private commode, an everyday adventure in discretion, dignity, and the relentless march of progress. And remember, In the royal palace, even the most basic routines come with their own set of challenges, historical baggage, and at least one mortified attendant. Getting dressed is a 40-minute ordeal involving up to 7 layers of clothing, some of which are never washed and all of which are designed to keep modesty in and fresh air out. The royal bloomers alone could stop a cavalry charge. Let's start at the very beginning. Your first duty of the day as the Queen's attendant, the ritual of layering Her Majesty into the most complex undergarments known to mankind. Forget simplicity. In the Victorian age, less is more has not yet entered the vocabulary. The Queen's underwear collection could reasonably be described as fortified, and every piece is more about architecture than comfort. The process begins with the chemise, a long, loose underdress of linen or cotton designed to protect outer garments from the horrors of human skin. This is the only layer likely to see a wash tub with any regularity. Everything that comes after is strictly on a don't ask, don't smell basis. You slip the chemise over the Queen's head and smooth it down, careful not to wrinkle the fabric or Her Majesty's already precarious patience. Next come the drawers, what we now call bloomers. Queen Victoria's are sturdy enough to qualify as armour. They're knee-length, tied with ribbons, and so voluminous they could double as a parachute in emergencies. In theory, they provide ventilation. In practice, they're an elaborate deterrent to both drafts and the curious gaze of any would-be scandalmonger. The bloomers are often monogrammed, heavily starched, and, if rumours are true, capable of withstanding a minor musket shot. After bloomers, you add the petticoats, sometimes 3 or 4, depending on the occasion, weather, and current political climate. Each is layered for maximum modesty and insulation, ensuring that Queen Victoria's lower half remains as mysterious as the fate of the princes in the Tower. These petticoats are rarely washed. Instead, they're aired out and spritzed with lavender water, which is optimistic at best. Corsets are next, and if you thought Victorian underwear was restrictive, just wait until you try lacing a royal corset after a hearty breakfast. The Queen is cinched into a whalebone and cotton marvel that compresses her waist and supports her back at the expense of comfort, breathing, and any sudden movements. A properly fitted corset can reduce one's silhouette by several inches and one's appetite by several courses. The corset cover follows, basically a short camisole meant to shield expensive gowns from the wear and tear of whalebone. Over this goes the crinoline, a vast bell-shaped cage of steel and horsehair designed to hold out the Queen's skirts. Crinolines are what separate the royal from the merely wealthy. They also make sitting, walking through doorways, and hugging small children nearly impossible. You're not done yet. On go the stockings, fastened with garters, each rolled carefully to avoid sagging at the ankles, a social disaster in any century. Stockings are changed only when they reach a level of stiffness more commonly associated with medieval tapestries. By this point, the Queen resembles a very regal, very determined onion, layer upon layer of defensive fabric. She is warm, protected, and as a side effect, utterly insulated from the outside world. Air circulation is a distant memory. The only breeze comes from flapping the folds of her petticoats, a trick employed by desperate ladies in waiting on particularly sweltering afternoons. Of course, every layer is another opportunity for things to go wrong. Twisted garters, lopsided petticoats, a corset string that snaps at the worst moment. Getting undressed is another production, requiring the reverse order, teamwork, and possibly a spotter in case anyone gets tangled. By the end, the Queen is armoured and upright, ready to face the day, modest, secure, and wrapped in more cotton than the combined output of Lancashire. If you've ever complained about modern shapewear, remember the royal bloomers and be grateful for lycra. In the Victorian Palace, underwear is both a state secret and a full-contact sport. Stockings are changed far less frequently than is healthy. The only thing holding them up is a prayer and a garter. Washing socks is considered advanced science. Let's take a journey down the royal leg. Don't worry, all in the name of history. Queen Victoria's morning routine includes the ceremonial unrolling of stockings, long, knee-high tubes of woven cotton, silk, or wool, depending on the season and the current relationship with the French textile industry. These are not your cozy modern socks with elastic and comfort in mind. No, Victorian stockings are more like decorative sleeves for your lower limbs, less about warmth or hygiene, and more about maintaining a line of demure, unbroken fabric from toe to petticoat. You start by locating a pair that are A, dry, B, intact, and C, not stiff enough to stand up on their own. This can be a challenge, as stockings are famously neglected in the royal laundry cycle. The logic is simple. If you don't sweat visibly and the stockings haven't been devoured by moths, why risk shrinking them with a wash? Instead, stockings are rotated, aired out on windowsills, and sometimes perfumed with lavender sachets for good measure. If you're lucky, you'll find a pair that still faintly remembers the scent of soap from 6 months ago. Getting stockings onto Her Majesty is a delicate operation requiring both finesse and flexibility. The Queen sits, foot propped on a velvet stool, while you gently slide the stocking up over her toes, ankle, and calf. There's always that moment of suspense as you negotiate the curve of the heel, praying the fabric doesn't ladder or catch on a stray toenail. Victorian stockings, while lovely, are fragile creatures, easily undone by enthusiasm or a rogue corgi. The real hero of the ensemble is the garter, a narrow ribbon or band tied just below the knee, whose job is to defy gravity and decorum alike. Some are made of silk, some of velvet, all designed to be as decorative as they are functional. Garter tying is a competitive sport in the palace, with elaborate bows and the occasional stitched motto. Honi soit qui mal y pense, for instance, is a classic, though stay up. For the love of God would probably be more accurate. Once fastened, the stockings and garters work together, more or less, to keep everything in place. It's an uphill battle. The stockings sag, bunch, and roll, requiring frequent attention from both the Queen and her attendants. Sometimes, you'll spot a royal portrait where the subject's ankle is scandalously exposed, not the artist's choice, but the result of a rebellious sock. Washing stockings is a task reserved for the bravest of the laundry staff. The process is closer to a science experiment than a household chore. Stockings are first soaked in tepid water, scrubbed with lye soap, and then pounded on a washboard with the sort of vigour usually reserved for getting stains out of battle flags. Afterward, they're hung to dry, preferably somewhere the public can't see them, lest rumours of the royal ankle spread like wildfire. Stockings rarely return from the wash unchanged. They shrink, twist, and acquire a roughness that makes you wonder if someone switched them with a medieval hair shirt. Some, especially the fancy silk pairs, disintegrate entirely and are quietly buried in the palace gardens, mourned by laundrymaids and footmen alike. But for all their faults, stockings are an essential part of the Victorian wardrobe. They provide a semblance of warmth, modesty, and style, even if they do harbour the faint aroma of yesterday's feet and last year's cologne. The Queen's favourite pairs are kept in a special drawer, separated by tissue paper and guarded like national treasures. So, the next time you slip on a pair of clean, elasticized socks, give a small nod to the heroes of the past, those unwashed, unsung stockings and the garters that dared to dream. In Queen Victoria's day, keeping your socks up was a full-time job, and clean feet were mostly a rumour. But they did it all with style, ceremony, and just a hint of lavender. No royal outfit is complete without a corset. These are rarely cleaned, and after weeks of wear, contain more of the Queen's DNA than a modern crime scene. If you find a lost earring in there, keep it. It's probably historical. Let's begin with the facts. The Victorian corset is both a feat of engineering and a monument to discomfort. Constructed from whalebone, steel, and enough heavy cotton to outfit a small regiment, the corset is designed to transform the royal torso into a fashionable hourglass, or, depending on your luck, a very dignified tube. But before you even touch the outer gown, you must first help Queen Victoria wriggle, contort, and, with dignity, of course, force herself into this garment of virtue, status, and questionable hygiene. First, you untangle the laces, yards and yards of them, sometimes knotted with a mysterious determination that suggests palace mice are moonlighting as mischievous tailors. The queen stands, arms outstretched, while you slip the corset around her middle. It's heavy, cool to the touch, and carries the faint aroma of rosewater, starch, and something distinctly lived in. Corsets, you see, are cleaned about as often as the monarchy holds referendums. Almost never. Why so infrequent? Because washing a corset is a Herculean labour. You can't just toss it into a copper tub. Water warps the whalebone, rusts the steel, and softens the fabric until it's one emotional speech away from collapse. Instead, corsets are simply aired out, dusted with talc, and, if things get truly dire, lightly wiped with a damp cloth and a whispered prayer to Saint Freshness. Over the weeks, the corset collects a rich tapestry of the Queen's life. There are traces of face powder, faint stains from strong tea, the subtle sheen of stress-induced perspiration, and, occasionally, the sticky evidence of a hurried breakfast. The inside panels are embroidered with the Queen's initials, sometimes more legible than others, depending on the state of last week's laundry. You might find a stray pin, an old handkerchief, or, if you're truly unlucky, a lost love letter tucked inside for safekeeping. Lacing the corset is a ceremony in itself. You start at the waist and work your way up and down, pulling tighter with each pass until the Queen's ribcage creaks in protest, and her posture is transformed from benevolent grandmother to steel-backed ruler of a global empire. The Queen bears it stoically, though you suspect she dreams nightly of elastic waistbands and yoga pants. Corsets do more than shape the body. They enforce a code of conduct. With your spine held rigid, every movement is measured, every breath a negotiation. Slouching is impossible. Bending at the waist? Unthinkable. Even the act of sitting requires the sort of choreography usually reserved for ballet. Meals are eaten in small, careful bites, too much, and the corset reminds you, firmly, that comfort is for commoners. But with rigidity comes risk. Weeks of wear with little to no washing means corsets become repositories for everything the Queen's daily schedule can throw at them. Summer brings the threat of mildew, while winter offers the dubious comfort of extra insulation. Some say that in especially humid conditions, a corset can hum faintly with the trapped essence of 1,000 royal events. You learn to ignore it. Everyone does. Occasionally, a thorough inspection is called for, an archaeological dig conducted with gloved hands and an air of scientific curiosity. Lost items are reclaimed, stains catalogued, and the faint outline of Queen Victoria's life is traced through the threads. One footman once discovered a brooch from 1848 and briefly considered making history by returning it. He didn't. It's still there, somewhere, waiting to be rediscovered. So, as you cinch the last lace and admire the regal silhouette, take a moment to appreciate the resilience of the Victorian corset and of the woman inside it. More than just underwear, it's a living archive, an instrument of torture and tradition, and a testament to the lengths people once went for fashion and respectability. Modern shapewear might pinch, but at least you can wash it. In Queen Victoria's day, your dignity and your DNA travelled everywhere you did, pressed firmly together under layers of linen, steel, and a stiff upper lip. Queen Victoria's signature scent is a blend of floral perfumes, herbal extracts, and the ever-present undertone of please don't notice the rest. Scented handkerchiefs are deployed like chemical weapons at crowded events. The royal dressing table is a riot of bottles, each with its own mysterious label and promising everything from English rose to spring meadow, which, after a few hours in a stuffy palace, smells more like late laundry day. There's no such thing as unscented in the Victorian world. If you can still detect your own skin under the layers of perfume, you're doing it wrong. Every morning, Queen Victoria's attendants select the day's bouquet, weighing the weather, the guest list, and, crucially, the mood of Her Majesty, who might demand violets on Monday and patchouli on Tuesday, depending on whether Parliament has annoyed her again. Application is a ritual unto itself. Perfume is dabbed on the wrists, behind the ears, along the neckline, and sometimes onto the edges of gloves, just in case the Queen feels like waving her hand in front of her own face for an emergency olfactory escape. The royal wardrobe is lightly spritzed before being draped over the Queen's frame, which only intensifies the competing fragrances of wool, lavender, starch, and imperial anxiety. By the time breakfast is served, the Queen leaves a perfumed wake through the palace corridors, confusing everyone from butlers to corgis. It's not just about luxury, it's survival. The Victorian era is a time before daily baths, modern deodorant, or the concept of personal space. London itself provides a competing aroma of coal, smoke, horse manure, and fog so thick you can smell the Thames in your tea. Perfume isn't just a flourish. It's an olfactory life preserver, in a city determined to test your nostrils at every turn. Crowded events, royal balls, banquets, garden parties, require even more drastic measures. The Queen's handkerchiefs, already beautiful with lace and monograms, are steeped in perfume until they can practically knock out a footman at 6 paces. In public, these are held delicately under the nose, not just for show, but as a defensive maneuver. You might imagine the scene, a ballroom swirling with silks, satin and sweat, every lady clutching a floral handkerchief as both accessory and emergency respirator. Perfume is also a subtle language at court. An extra dab of orange blossom signals that the Queen is in a forgiving mood. A heavy dose of musk might mean someone's in trouble, possibly you. When Queen Victoria is displeased, the air in her chambers turns sharp with rosemary and sage, a clear warning for everyone to tread lightly and speak softly. Of course, sometimes things go awry. Too many scents blend together, and the effect is less English garden and more confused apothecary. There are stories of courtiers fainting from the combined effect of summer heat and competitive perfumery. The Queen herself has been known to wrinkle her nose and request an open window, a rare move in an era where fresh air was often considered dangerous. Not all scents are created equal. Some days, the Queen's preferred essence runs out, and substitutes must be found. Cologne water, elderflower, even a desperate dash of someone else's aftershave. A clever attendant might sneak a few drops of peppermint onto a lace cuff to keep Her Majesty awake during especially tedious council meetings. It's all part of the job. And perfume isn't just for people. The palace itself is regularly fumigated with potpourri, scented oils, and bunches of dried herbs tucked into every curtain fold. Even the royal carriages are spritzed before important journeys, just in case a wayward pig cart or particularly ambitious London fog should threaten to overpower the royal nostrils. So, the next time you reach for a bottle of perfume, give a grateful sniff for modern plumbing and hot showers. For Queen Victoria, every day was a high-stakes battle in the war against unpleasant odours, and if her perfume lingered long after she left the room, it was less about vanity and more about sheer survival. In the Victorian world, if you wanted to smell like an empire, you needed more than power. You needed an industrial-strength handkerchief and nerves of steel. Dirty nails? Stained fingers? Never fear. The solution is simple. Gloves, and lots of them. In Victorian England, gloves are the only thing standing between you and a viral outbreak. Imagine the Queen's dressing room, a veritable armoury of gloves in every possible shade, material and length. There are white kid gloves for royal audiences, grey cotton for church, delicate lace for garden strolls, and stout leather for braving the terrors of the British outdoors. Each pair has its role in the daily drama of hiding what the world need never see, the very human hands of royalty. You, as Queen Victoria's trusted attendant, are guardian of the glove drawer. Your morning task: to select a fresh pair from a velvet-lined box, laying them gently next to the washstand. Today's choice is white, elegant, refined, and, crucially, very good at hiding any evidence that Her Majesty spent half an hour in the rose garden pulling up weeds. The Queen, after all, is not immune to the lure of gardening or the perils of 19th century ink stains. Gloves in this era are not just a fashion statement, they are practical personal protective equipment. There are no nail salons, no miracle cuticle creams, and soap is still regarded with suspicion. The average royal hand, even if bathed in rosewater, is at constant risk of being betrayed by soil, ink, or remnants of last night's blackcurrant tart. Gloves allow you to shake hands with ambassadors, pat corgis, or point regally at things without giving away the state secrets written on your fingertips. Slipping on a pair of gloves is an art form. There are rituals, stretching the fabric, working the fingers in gently, smoothing each crease as if tucking in a child for bed. Too tight, and the gloves will split at the seams before tea. Too loose, and you risk a fashion catastrophe. The Queen's hands must appear effortless, as if she was born with elegant white paws ready for any official portrait. But gloves aren't just about looking good, they're about avoiding germs. Victorians may not know the word bacteria, but they are suspicious of anything invisible, contagious, or French. The world outside the palace is teeming with hazards. Grubby handshakes, street urchins, and doorknobs that have never met a disinfectant. With gloves on, the Queen can touch, gesture, and greet without fear of bringing half of London's microbial population back to her dinner table. There are, of course, downsides. Gloves get dirty fast. White gloves, in particular, have the half-life of a mayfly when faced with a palace breakfast of eggs and jam. Washing gloves is a delicate, labour-intensive process involving lemon juice, chalk, stretching, and enough patience to impress a Buddhist monk. Most are simply swapped out for a fresh pair at the first sign of distress, the soiled ones sent to a special glove laundress whose job is probably listed under hazardous. Glove etiquette is an entire curriculum. You never eat with your gloves on unless you enjoy the taste of kid leather. You must remove the right glove for handshakes, but never the left, unless you're about to duel, in which case you have bigger problems. To drop a glove in public is to risk social scandal. There are tales of whole dinner parties thrown into chaos by a single, errant glove rolling across the carpet like a rogue tumbleweed. For the Queen, gloves are also a kind of emotional armour. They keep the world at bay, literally and figuratively. If she wishes to end a conversation, she simply begins to adjust her gloves, a subtle signal that even the thickest-headed minister can understand. And if things get truly dire, she can always clap them together briskly, sending a small cloud of talcum powder into the air and scattering lingering courtiers. So next time you look at your hands, clean, moisturized, and blissfully bare, think of Queen Victoria and her arsenal of gloves. In an age where every handshake was a gamble and every nail a potential diplomatic incident, gloves weren't just accessories. They were the last, best defense against the world, its germs, and the ever-present threat of public humiliation. Washing day for the Queen's linens is a logistical nightmare that happens less often than most royal birthdays. Wet laundry is dried by hanging it in the chilly palace corridors, resulting in a scent best described as fresh despair. Let's set the scene. It's laundry day at Buckingham Palace, a moment so rare that palace staff prepare as if for a royal coronation. Somewhere, a footman is fainting. In the basement, an entire battalion of maids lines up for duty, sleeves rolled and spirits sinking. You, as the Queen's personal attendant, find yourself clutching a stack of pillowcases that haven't seen daylight, or a wash tub, since the last solar eclipse. Victorian laundry is not the gentle, bubbly affair of the modern age. Forget the soft chug of a washing machine. In Queen Victoria's time, laundry is a full-body contact sport involving buckets of scalding water, wooden paddles, and enough soap to startle the wildlife at Hyde Park. The process begins in the early hours, when a line of servants descends into the depths of the palace, their arms loaded with everything from nightgowns to monogrammed handkerchiefs to a single, suspiciously heavy tablecloth. Every piece must be accounted for. Losing a royal pillowcase is a punishable offence, nearly on par with stealing the crown jewels, or at least the cheese platter. The first step is soaking. Linens are submerged in barrels of boiling water, softening the grime, sweat, and centuries of embedded history. Lye soap is grated into the mix, a no-nonsense concoction of animal fat and caustic soda that promises cleanliness but delivers chapped hands and vivid nightmares. Maids swirl the linens with wooden paddles, their faces red from steam and moral fortitude. Singing is optional, but complaining is universal. Once soaked, each item is scrubbed against a ribbed washboard with the sort of vigour usually reserved for political speeches or arguments about the proper use of Your Majesty. For stubborn stains, wine, ink, or a mysterious brown splotch from the Queen's beloved corgis, a stiff brush is employed, turning the process into a noisy, soapy duel. Rinsing comes next. Water is carried by the bucketful. No indoor plumbing here, just miles of stone floors and aching backs. Linens are wrung by hand, then sent up through the labyrinthine palace corridors to dry. There, sheets and petticoats are draped over banisters, chair backs, and, if you're unlucky, the occasional bust of a long-dead ancestor. The air fills with the unmistakable aroma of wet cotton and regret. The official palace description, fresh despair. The unofficial verdict, at least it's not mildew. Drying laundry in a Victorian palace is an exercise in compromise. The corridors are cold and draughty, perfect for encouraging that crisp finish, less ideal for morale. Royal linens flap in the breeze, occasionally startling passing dignitaries or disappearing altogether if a window is left open. The process can take days, especially during London's famous damp spells, when nothing dries except the staff's patience. And let's not forget the ironing. In the final act of this operatic production, heavy irons heated on the fire are wielded with skill and caution. Scorch marks are a constant threat. A perfectly ironed pillowcase is a thing of rare beauty, a clean, smooth testament to human endurance, and a deep-seated fear of the Queen's disapproving eyebrow. Clean linens are carefully folded and returned to the royal linen closet, where they will wait patiently for their annual moment in the sun. Any items deemed unfit are sent to the rag pile, reincarnated as dusters or emergency shoe polish cloths. By the end of laundry day, the staff are exhausted, the palace smells faintly of soap and sacrifice, and the Queen herself sleeps peacefully on sheets that, at least for the next few weeks, are undeniably, unforgettably clean. So, the next time you throw a load in the wash and grumble about folding socks, spare a moment for the unsung laundry heroes of Victorian England. For them, clean sheets were a luxury, not a given. And the lingering perfume of fresh despair was simply part of the royal experience. Stepping outside means navigating Victorian London's fragrant streets, where open sewers, horse manure, and a fog that's mostly made of coal dust await. The royal nose is kept aloft for practical and psychological reasons. Let's follow Queen Victoria as she prepares for a public appearance, a royal walkabout through the capital, accompanied by her court and the collective hopes of the British public that she will not faint from the stench. The royal carriage, polished to an improbable shine, waits in the palace courtyard. But no matter how immaculate the carriage, nothing can shield the Queen from the full sensory assault of Victorian London the moment she descends from her regal chariot. Before venturing outside, there's a ritual of preparation. Attendants check every detail. A fresh spritz of rose water for the Queen's gloves, a double layer of handkerchiefs, and, for good measure, a dab of lavender under the nostrils. The Queen's wardrobe is selected for maximum coverage, high collars, gloves, layers, and a veil, not just for modesty, but as an olfactory buffer between Her Majesty and the invisible clouds of urban character. Now, out onto the street. The palace gates swing open and Queen Victoria is met by cheering crowds, hopeful dignitaries, and the not-so-distant fragrance of civilization in flux. The streets themselves are a patchwork of cobblestones, mud, and other substances. Horses are everywhere, and so are their inevitable gifts to the city. The phrase, "Don't step in it" is less advice, and more a daily mantra, repeated under the breath of every royal attendant. Open sewers run alongside the roads, often disguised as drainage ditches, their contents freely mingling with the rain. On hot days, the city air simmers with a bouquet of rotting vegetables, fishmongers' scraps, and the ever-present hint of coal smoke that leaves a grey film on every exposed surface, including, eventually, the Queen's own shoes. The infamous Great Stink of 1858 is still fresh in everyone's minds, a cautionary tale about what happens when the Thames rises up and says, "Enough is enough." Crowds line the walkways, eager to catch a glimpse of their monarch, all the while fanning themselves with hats or newspapers, not just from the excitement, but to wave away the worst of the smells. The royal nose, famously elevated, is more than an attitude, it's a survival mechanism. The Queen perfects her distant gaze, staring just above the heads of the masses, as if admiring the architecture or pondering foreign policy. In reality, she's simply trying not to breathe too deeply. Street vendors hawk their wares, their voices competing with the cries of carriage drivers and the clatter of hooves. Occasionally, a sudden breeze stirs up a particularly aggressive whiff from a nearby sewer grate. In these moments, the Queen's handkerchief is pressed to her lips, part pose, part practical response to the olfactory onslaught. Attendants remain at the ready with fresh scented sachets and a small flask of vinegar water, should the Queen's constitution require reinforcement. Despite the hazards, a royal walkabout is essential for morale. Queen Victoria's subjects need to see her, alive, upright, and preferably unfazed by whatever the city has to throw at her shoes. She endures, moving with deliberate grace, past flower sellers, street musicians, and children whose faces are more coal than skin. The Queen occasionally pauses to shake hands, gloves firmly on, distribute coins, or offer a nod to a veteran, each act a demonstration that the monarchy, like London itself, will survive anything. By the end of the outing, everyone is a little dazed, a little grimmier, and deeply appreciative of the clean water waiting back at the palace. The Queen is whisked away for a change of clothes, her shoes handed off for emergency polishing, and the entire household breathes a collective sigh of relief. The scented candles in the royal suite are lit, the windows opened, if the air outside isn't too foul, and peace, such as it is, descends once again. So next time you stroll down a clean, well-paved city street, spare a grateful thought for Queen Victoria, bravely facing the world with her chin up and her nose in the air. Public cleanliness was a work in progress, and nobody worked harder than the woman who had to pretend she couldn't smell a thing. Hand-washing is reserved for special occasions, high holidays, and after handling actual dirt. Most days, a polite wipe on a handkerchief suffices. Step into Queen Victoria's palace, and you'll quickly notice that while the halls might sparkle, the hands, not so much. The modern obsession with hand sanitizer would baffle and probably terrify the average Victorian. For Her Majesty and her court, washing your hands is something you do if you must, never just because you feel like it. After all, natural oils are in, and overwashing is believed to weaken the constitution. This is a time when hand cleanliness is measured in shades of grey, not in lathers of antibacterial foam. Let's imagine the hand-washing setup in the royal chambers. There's a porcelain basin, a ewer filled with cool water, and a bar of soap with the density and aroma of last year's cheese. This soap, if it appears at all, is reserved for dirty work, such as after gardening, petting the corgis, or signing a particularly sticky treaty. The rest of the time, a swift pass of a handkerchief, perhaps lightly scented with lavender, is enough to signal that all is well and sanitary, or at least presentable. The truth is, the average royal day is surprisingly light on situations that require actual hand-washing. The Queen is surrounded by servants, each tasked with handling things that might, by some remote chance, be considered unclean. Fruit is peeled, letters opened, doors handled, all by someone else. If Her Majesty must touch something questionable, an attendant is standing by with a cloth or a quick intervention. Of course, special occasions call for special measures. A grand banquet? Out comes the rose-scented water for a ceremonial dip of the fingers before and after the meal. An important religious holiday? expect a more thorough washing, with prayers for both the soul and the cuticles. But the daily grind, a discreet wipe, a subtle pat, and onward to the next royal duty. Victorian etiquette books offer pages of advice on the importance of not presenting soiled hands in polite society. Yet, in practice, clean is a sliding scale. A little ink stain from writing royal decrees? That's a sign of hard work. A bit of earth under the nails from an afternoon in the garden? That's positively rustic, almost charming. The only true faux pas is visible grime that cannot be explained away by duty, virtue, or the antics of an especially rambunctious pet. Nails, meanwhile, are a whole separate saga. Clippers are crude, so most shaping is done with a small knife or a determined bit of sandpaper. Buffing with a chamois cloth gives a faint sheen, just enough to pass muster in candlelight. Manicures, as we know them, do not exist. Cuticles, hangnails, and accidental nicks are part of life. If things get dire, gloves will cover a multitude of sins and are considered the first line of defense against both judgment and contagion. There are, of course, moments of hygiene-related panic. After shaking hands with a particularly sweaty dignitary or accepting a mysterious parcel from the outer reaches of the empire, Queen Victoria may retreat to her washstand for a quick rinse, accompanied by muttered observations about the decline of standards abroad. In these moments, water splashes, soap is grudgingly used, and the air fills with the scent of violet or lemon. But soon enough, the basin is set aside, the hands dried on a towel, and life continues, slightly cleaner but no less dignified. Modern germ theory is still in its infancy, and the link between clean hands and health is something only the most cutting-edge doctors whisper about. For now, the prevailing wisdom is simple. Keep up appearances, hide what you must, and let the world believe that royal hands are, if not spotless, then at least spotless enough for government work. So next time you instinctively scrub up before dinner or after touching a doorknob, give a silent nod to Queen Victoria and her handkerchief army. In her palace, a clean hand is a rare sight, but a well-disguised one is an art form. The Queen's beauty regime includes mysterious jars of cold cream, occasional hot towels, and enough talcum powder to coat a billiard table. Moisturizer? Not invented yet. SPF? Good luck. Welcome to the royal boudoir, a place of swirling scents and hope, where every surface is crowded with ornate jars and bottles, and every beauty tip comes straight from a Greek myth or the back of a cough syrup label. Queen Victoria's approach to skincare is part science experiment, part theatrical performance, and part exercise in patience. The first step each morning, cold cream. Victorian cold creams are thick, waxy concoctions, equal parts beeswax, mineral oil, almond essence, and whatever the apothecary had left over at the end of the week. The Queen's favourite is rumoured to have a faint whiff of cucumber and a more pronounced scent of old soap. As her attendant, you scoop a marble-sized dollop and begin to apply it gently to Her Majesty's face. It doesn't so much soak in as linger on the surface, forming a barrier against London's infamous fog, coal dust, and the ever-present risk of chafing bonnets. If the Queen has slept poorly or, heaven forbid, attended a particularly long council meeting, hot towels are summoned. These arrive steaming, straight from a pan above the kitchen range, and are laid carefully over the face. The effect is both relaxing and slightly alarming, leaving the royal cheeks pink and damp, the air suddenly scented with lavender and the faintest note of last night's roast beef. The towels, after all, share their heat source with dinner. Exfoliation is a subtle affair, if it happens at all. There are no apricot scrubs, glycolic acids, or miracle serums. Instead, the Queen's attendants rely on the gentle abrasion of a linen cloth and the daily dusting of London itself. Once a week, perhaps, a homemade mixture of oatmeal and rosewater is applied, promising to brighten the complexion and do little else besides clog the palace drains. Now comes the main event, talcum powder. Talc is applied in heroic quantities, not just to the face but to neck, chest, arms, and anywhere else that might chafe beneath the daily onslaught of linen, wool, and steel-boned corsetry. The powder creates a fine, ghostly haze that follows the queen wherever she goes, leaving a trail on dark upholstery and the occasional startled dignitary. At court events, the air is so thick with talc that one can track a passing baroness by her footprints, like fresh snow. What about sun protection? The best the Victorians can offer is shade, a wide-brimmed hat, a delicate veil, or the strategic deployment of a parasol. Tanned skin is for gardeners, sailors, and anyone else unfortunate enough to work outdoors. The Queen's own complexion is fiercely guarded, with every trip into the garden requiring a minimum of 3 layers and an emergency handkerchief to dab away any signs of unseemly warmth. Of course, skincare is not all pampering. Remedies for blemishes range from the creative to the hazardous. Lemon juice is dabbed on freckles, hoping for a miracle. Spots are concealed with rice powder or, failing that, a brisk dash of vinegar. More persistent imperfections might prompt a visit from the royal physician, whose solutions tend to involve mercury, arsenic, or a recommendation to think cheerful thoughts. If you've ever worried about what's in your moisturizer, rest easy. At least it's not arsenic. By the end of the routine, Queen Victoria is powdered, polished, and only slightly oily. The air is thick with competing scents, the towels are whisked away for laundering, and the mysterious jars are capped until tomorrow. The Queen faces her day with a calm resolve and skin protected by a 1-inch barrier of determination and beeswax. So, as you lather, exfoliate, and SPF yourself into modern radiance, remember the women who ruled an empire with nothing but cold cream and a prayer. If their skin survived London's soot, palace air, and a lifetime of courtly stress, yours can handle a bit of Monday morning Zoom. If you think Queen Victoria's standards are high for herself, just wait until you see what's expected of her children. Wipe your face means with a sleeve, and bath time is only slightly more frequent than leap years. Picture the royal nursery. An echoing suite in Buckingham Palace with high windows, elaborate wallpaper, and at least one rocking horse that's seen more action than a cavalry regiment. Here, princes and princesses tumble through daily life, closely watched by an army of nannies, governesses, and footmen, all determined to maintain discipline, order, and, if possible, a passing resemblance of cleanliness. The day begins with a cacophony of voices. "Up, up," rings the call, and the small royals blink sleep from their eyes, crawling out from under a fortress of woolen blankets. Immediately, the first battle begins, coaxing each child into something resembling a wash. The royal approach is minimalist, a quick pass with a cold, damp flannel across the face, a half-hearted comb through hair, and, if someone remembers, a cursory rinse of hands in a basin that's been freshly filled for the occasion. Teeth are regarded as decorative bones and given a hasty once-over with a brush that's been around since Queen Victoria's wedding. As for clothing, the children are dressed in layers almost as elaborate as the Queen's own wardrobe: chemises, petticoats, stockings, and tiny tailored jackets. Each layer is another opportunity for stains and smudges, and despite the best efforts of nannies, it's only a matter of minutes before someone appears with jam on their cuffs or a mysterious smudge across their brow. A sleeve is the favoured napkin. If it's lace, so much the better. Stains are shrugged off. After all, who in the palace hasn't had to dab gravy from a silk sash or wipe plum preserves off a velvet collar? Bath time is announced with dread and intrigue. The Queen herself may insist on regular ablutions for the sake of character building, but the practicalities are daunting. The royal tub, a deep, tin-lined basin big enough for at least 3 children or one particularly energetic pony, is wheeled into the nursery with great fanfare. Water is lugged up by sweating footmen, cooled with pails from the scullery, and perfumed with a single drop of lavender oil to disguise the iron tang of Victorian plumbing. Baths are brisk and businesslike. Nannies scrub behind ears, between toes, and, in moments of optimism, under fingernails. The water darkens by the minute as dust, ink, crumbs, and the day's mischief are washed away. Squeals of protest ring out as someone's hair is detangled with a comb last used to tease out the Queen's chignon. There's much splashing, a little crying, and a final, victorious bundling into towels before everyone is dressed in fresh linen and deposited in the nursery for lessons. Despite all efforts, royal children are a magnet for grime. They tumble through palace corridors, play in the gardens, and, when no one's looking, chase the corgis through the mud. There are daily encounters with inkwells, paint boxes, and anything likely to leave a mark. The royal nannies give chase with damp cloths and sharp warnings, but the children remain undefeated, as if filth itself is part of the curriculum. Punishments for persistent dirt are light. Perhaps an extra lesson in penmanship or the confiscation of a favoured toy. The Queen is far more concerned with manners than immaculate fingernails. And as long as the children remember to bow, curtsy, and say please, all is forgiven. Besides, a little mud is proof of healthy curiosity and sturdy British constitution. By bedtime, the children are gathered for a final round of minimal washing, a quick brush of the hair, another pass with a damp cloth, and an inspection for rogue crumbs or smudges. Pyjamas are donned, kisses exchanged, and the day's adventures fade into dreams of secret gardens and pillow forts. So the next time you fret over a sticky handprint on your wall or a mysterious stain on a favourite shirt, remember the royal nursery, where hygiene is an aspiration, dirt is inevitable, and every sleeve is a perfectly acceptable napkin in the grand tradition of Queen Victoria's own children. Let's just say the subject is not discussed in polite company, and the less said about the royal bidet experiment of 1854, the better. Hygiene is a matter of faith, not evidence. In the rarefied air of Buckingham Palace, some topics are best left behind a heavy velvet curtain. Intimate hygiene is one of them, a delicate phrase that sends even the most seasoned ladies-in-waiting into a flurry of meaningful coughs and sudden interest in the nearest vase of flowers. Victorian England is a world obsessed with propriety, modesty, and the deep, desperate hope that no one ever asks exactly how things are kept clean down there. But of course, behind closed doors, something must be done. The basics of Victorian undergarment technology do little to help. Picture layer after layer, chemises, drawers, petticoats, corsets, all designed to keep everything hidden and, at best, well ventilated. Yet, when nature calls, efficiency is not exactly built into the design. Split drawers offer a solution, but with all those layers, navigation is a challenge best not attempted in a hurry or without at least one trusted maid on standby. As for cleansing, water is a rare and carefully rationed resource in the realm of personal care. A private pitcher and basin might be stationed behind a modesty screen in the royal bedroom. Once a day, twice if one is feeling especially modern, Queen Victoria or her attendant uses a damp cloth or soft sponge for a strategic, swift clean. Soap is sparingly applied. After all, medical wisdom warns that overuse may cause fainting fits or emotional instability. It's a ritual shrouded in discretion, practiced quickly and quietly, often accompanied by the rustle of petticoats and the ever-present fear of being overheard by a stray page boy. Now, about the infamous bidet. Imported from France and hailed as the latest Parisian marvel, the royal bidet of 1854 was a bold experiment in continental cleanliness. It was also a disaster. No one in the palace knew exactly how to use it, let alone clean it, and the resulting confusion became legend among the servants. Was it a fountain? A foot bath? A very decorative soup tureen? Rumours abounded, and after a single, harrowing encounter involving an accidental soaking of a visiting archduchess, the device was quietly wheeled away, never to be mentioned again. Scents are the next line of defence. Lavender sachets, rose water, and even orris root powder are liberally applied to undergarments and linens. The idea is simple. If you can't be certain everything is spotless, at least you can ensure it's fragrant. Sometimes this works. Sometimes it simply creates a blend best described as floral mystery with notes of desperation. Perfumed handkerchiefs are kept close at hand, not just for show, but to waft gently as needed in moments of social peril. Medical advice on feminine hygiene is, at best, inconsistent. Some doctors warn against washing too often, while others prescribe alarming regimens involving vinegar, alum, or mercury. Most women, royal or not, trust their own instincts, plus the quiet counsel of older ladies who've seen it all and lived to tell the tale, but only in whispers. Officially, of course, such matters do not exist. Unofficially, the palace's laundry staff possesses an encyclopedic knowledge of what's really going on, though they value their jobs too much to gossip openly, at least not within earshot of the Queen. Discretion, more than cleanliness, is the rule. Accidents happen, stains appear, and sometimes the royal bloomers are rushed off for an emergency airing. In those moments, everyone is suddenly very busy polishing silver, arranging flowers, or urgently tending to the corgis. The monarchy has survived wars, scandals, and outbreaks of nearly everything, but nothing is so universally agreed upon as the wisdom of pretending that all is always perfectly fresh behind the palace doors. So next time you're grateful for hot water, gentle soap, and a locking bathroom door, remember Queen Victoria, managing intimate hygiene with nothing but a cloth, a prayer, and the kind of steely reserve that builds an empire. In the Victorian court, some secrets are safe not because they're well kept, but because nobody dares ask. At the end of a long day, the Queen retires to her boudoir, surrounded by lace, velvet, and the soft perfume of slightly used nightgowns. Sleep comes quickly, dreams of soap are rare. Let's step quietly into Queen Victoria's bedroom, a sanctuary of heavy curtains, flickering candlelight, and at least 6 decorative pillows of varying historical importance. The air hums with a mixture of lavender water, rose potpourri, and the lingering memory of 100 royal engagements. Here, cleanliness is less a goal and more an optimistic suggestion. After all, if you can't see it in the candlelight, it's not a problem tonight. The evening routine begins with the Queen's transformation from symbol of empire to simply a woman trying to survive another day in Victorian undergarments. First, the corset is unfastened, often with a sigh of relief loud enough to startle a footman. The layers of petticoats, crinolines, and drawers are peeled away, sometimes one at a time, sometimes in a single desperate flourish. Each piece is inspected by the attendant for signs of wear, tear, or outright mutiny, especially the infamous bloomers, which are swiftly deposited in the airing pile for tomorrow's sunlight and a prayer. Next comes the ceremonial face washing, a quick splash of cold water, a dab of rose or violet cream, and a firm resolve to not worry about tomorrow's complexion. Soap is usually bypassed unless there's visible evidence of dinner or diplomatic negotiations gone awry. The Queen's skin, by this hour, has survived 12 hours of London air, a handful of nervous courtiers, and at least one meal where someone spilled gravy. Moisturizer? Not on the menu. Instead, the Queen relies on the restorative powers of sleep, faith, and perhaps a touch of beeswax. Hair is tackled next. If it's a good day, the royal mane is let down, brushed thoroughly, and loosely braided for the night. If it's a bad day, rain, scandal, or an especially complicated tiara, it's simply wrapped in a silk scarf and left to sort itself out by morning. Any lost hairpins discovered in the process are quietly set aside, occasionally catalogued for posterity, and sometimes blamed on the corgis. Then, it's time for the nightgown, a garment that would make a modern spa robe look like swimwear. Queen Victoria's nightwear is all flowing cotton, lace, and ruffles, thick enough to withstand a Scottish winter and stylish enough to impress even the most judgmental great-aunt. Nightgowns are rarely washed more than strictly necessary, so each one carries the faintest bouquet of old starch, last week's lavender sachet, and the stubborn spirit of Victorian laundry day. Slippers are swapped for soft woolen bed socks. Hands are inspected, wiped, and tucked under the covers, still faintly smelling of glove leather and a day's worth of compromise. At the bedside table, a glass of water sits ready, alongside a vial of smelling salts, a Bible, and perhaps the latest scandalous novel tucked inside a more respectable cover, of course. The room grows quiet. Candles are snuffed, one by one, until only shadows and the muffled sound of a distant clock remain. Queen Victoria settles under the weight of layers, wool, eiderdown, and more lace than the Vatican gift shop. The palace, too, seems to breathe out and relax. If the sheets are fresh, it's a minor miracle. If not, well, there's always tomorrow and another chance for the laundry maids to shine. As she drifts off, the Queen is enveloped in the soft, lived-in aroma of her world, rosewater, talcum, starch, and the inescapable truth of human history. Cleanliness, in the Victorian sense, is less about perfection and more about persistence, a nightly negotiation with dust, laundry schedules, and the grand illusion that everything is as it should be. So the next time you slide into crisp, laundered sheets, spare a nod to Queen Victoria and her nightly routine. In her boudoir, goodnight is a hope, a wish, and the sweet, lingering scent of a day well survived, even if the soap stays a dream. If the Queen falls ill, the doctor prescribes the most advanced medical thinking of the era: less bathing, more brandy, and perhaps a dab of mercury ointment. Don't ask about outcomes. In the 19th century, the intersection of hygiene and healthcare is more of a roundabout than a crossroads. Queen Victoria's palace, for all its grandeur, is a hive of germs waiting for an opportunity. The royal family's health is a national obsession. Yet, Victorian medical wisdom is still catching up with the idea that soap and water might do more good than a bottle of patent medicine with a picture of a mustachioed man on the label. When the Queen sneezes, it's a palace event. Whispered panic spreads down marble corridors. Her personal physician, a man of immense sideburns and even greater confidence, rushes in, black bag swinging, prepared for anything except a modern understanding of infection control. His tools are impressive: glass thermometers, silver-tipped tongue depressors, and a large bottle of cognac for both medicinal and morale purposes. The doctor's first question is not, "Are you feeling feverish?" but "Have you been overdoing the bathing?" In Victorian thinking, too much washing weakens the system, opens the pores to mischief, and is liable to invite in the chill air that causes all manner of calamities, from catarrh to outright melancholia. If the Queen confesses to 2 sponge baths in a week, she can expect a stern lecture and a prescription for a few days' rest, preferably in a warm room under layers of wool, with the windows tightly shut. Brandy is the universal medicine. A snifter is poured for the Queen and, frequently, for everyone in attendance. It's said to steady the nerves, ward off chills, and, if nothing else, make the hours pass more pleasantly while waiting for the fever to break. For coughs, a blend of honey, lemon, and neat whiskey is recommended, ideally chased by silence and heavy drapes. Should symptoms persist, the real fun begins. The physician recommends mercury ointment for skin complaints, mustard plasters for aches, and, if things look dire, a dose of castor oil or a gentle bloodletting. The royal medicine cabinet is a treasure chest of horrors: jars of leeches, tins of camphor, bottles labelled "patent remedy for all afflictions." Each treatment is an adventure in hope, luck, and the sturdy resilience of the human body. Cleanliness, meanwhile, is a double-edged sword. On one hand, the Queen's attendants are urged to dust more often, air out the bedchamber briefly, and boil linens if fever strikes. On the other, doctors warn against too much fresh air or water, lest the patient catch a chill and spiral into something even worse. The Queen herself finds the advice baffling but follows orders, mostly because nobody wants to cross a royal doctor with a passion for mustard poultices and alarming Latin. Handwashing is rare and mostly symbolic: a dip in rosewater before meals, a perfunctory wipe after. Infections are attributed to bad airs, not dirty hands or unwashed tools. Germ theory is still whispered in progressive circles, but in the palace, tradition reigns supreme. When someone recovers, credit goes to a mixture of prayer, perseverance, and whatever was in that last bottle from the apothecary. For the Queen, illness is an exercise in patience, not science. She endures the ministrations of her physician, the endless advice of her ladies-in-waiting, "Have you tried more brandy?" and the clamour of the nation's concern. Baths are postponed, windows remain shut, and the hope is that, by sheer force of royal will and a strong constitution, she'll emerge victorious. So the next time you reach for paracetamol and fresh sheets, remember Queen Victoria's struggles: less bathing, more brandy, and medical treatments that could just as easily be a dare. If you survive Victorian healthcare, you can survive anything, especially if you never ask about outcomes. Over the years, the Queen's nose becomes her greatest asset. Able to ignore almost anything, it's rumoured she could walk through a cheese market without flinching. Imagine, for a moment, a royal nose in training. From the moment of her coronation, Queen Victoria is bombarded by the full spectrum of 19th century aromas. There's the tang of coal smoke from the palace chimneys, the robust presence of horse manure drifting through London's open streets, and the more delicate, persistent bouquet of human ambition, sweat, and mutton gravy that fills every government hall. The Queen's nose must quickly learn what to filter, what to tolerate, and when to retreat discreetly behind a perfumed handkerchief. The art of olfactory survival begins at home. Buckingham Palace, for all its grandeur, is a symphony of competing scents. The kitchens produce their own medley: boiling cabbage, roasting beef, fish pie on Fridays. Add to this the chorus of cleaning products: coal tar soap, lye, lavender polish, and the undertones of musty carpet, occasionally mingling with the hopeful attempts of potpourri. A less practiced nose might falter, but Queen Victoria's is legendary for its resolve. Public appearances demand a whole new level of nasal fortitude. Every royal procession is a march through the living history of Victorian London. Open sewers, fishmongers' carts, and the ever-present press of humanity, each person with their own contribution to the city's collective fragrance. The Queen's solution? The royal nose lift, a gesture part dignity, part defence mechanism. Head held high, nostrils aimed skyward, Her Majesty can acknowledge a crowd, inspect a regiment, and glide past a week-old puddle of mysterious origin without betraying a single twitch. Rumour has it that her ability to withstand odours is the real secret to her longevity. Ministers marvel at her composure during cabinet meetings, unaware that she's simply mastered the art of shallow breathing. She learns to time her inhalations with the opening of palace windows, the lighting of a new coal fire, or the well-timed arrival of fresh flowers. Her handkerchief, always scented with violet or rose water, is ever at the ready, not just for delicate sneezes, but for subtle olfactory self-defense. This remarkable nose is not just a shield, but a finely tuned political instrument. The Queen can sniff out a diplomatic crisis as surely as she can detect a badly made stew. When attending state dinners, she offers polite nods and vague compliments on the unique flavours, even as her nostrils warn her against the pickled eel or the aggressively aged Stilton. Foreign dignitaries quickly learn, if Queen Victoria lowers her head and reaches for her handkerchief, it's time to reconsider the local delicacies. Her family and staff, too, benefit from her olfactory endurance. Royal children are gently but firmly encouraged to play outdoors, far, far outdoors, after particularly creative days in the nursery. Corgis are kept at a reasonable distance until they've had a bath, or at least a thorough airing. Guests known for potent colognes or pungent pipe tobacco are strategically seated near open doors, both for ventilation and diplomatic reasons. Not every odour can be overcome. Occasionally, a palace corridor is simply too much, a confluence of drying laundry, damp wool, and the ghosts of dinners past. In these moments, the Queen's nose serves as an early warning system. A discreet cough, a meaningful glance, and an entire hallway can be cleared, cleaned, or simply abandoned until nature, or the staff, has worked its magic. In the end, the Queen's nose is both her first line of defence and her greatest unsung talent. It helps her navigate the perilous world of Victorian hygiene, maintain composure amidst the chaos of empire, and ensure that no one, not even the footman, can ever accuse her of losing her head or her breakfast. So the next time you wrinkle your nose at an overripe bin or the faintest whiff of gym bag, remember Queen Victoria, master of the art, mistress of the moment, and survivor of the most perilous scent landscape in royal history. If she could smile through the cheese market, you can survive the office kitchen. After decades on the throne, Queen Victoria's hygiene habits shape a nation, sometimes for the worse. Future generations will look back and wonder, how did anyone survive the age of corsets, coal, and annual baths? The answer, as with all things Victorian, is complicated. Queen Victoria's reign saw the British Empire expand to the farthest corners of the globe. Yet her daily routines, so meticulously observed, so spectacularly impractical, set the tone for a society obsessed with outward respectability and inward discomfort. Cleanliness, it turns out, was less a state of being and more a national aspiration, measured in lavender sachets, gallons of rosewater, and the unwavering belief that if you smelled nice and kept your ankles covered, everything else would work itself out. Her Majesty led by example. The Queen's careful layering of bloomers and chemises, her reverent avoidance of unnecessary baths, and her steadfast reliance on perfumes and powders trickled down the social ladder. Victorian etiquette books multiplied like rabbits, offering advice on how to stay clean in an age when water was often as questionable as the politics. Soap became a moral battleground. To wash too often was decadent. Too rarely, disgraceful. The result? Everyone did just enough to avoid comment and hoped that no one ever looked too closely, literally or metaphorically. Palace practices rippled outward, influencing middle-class households eager to emulate the royals. Suddenly, even those who could only dream of a crinoline wanted hygienic homes. Yet these efforts, for all their scrubbing and starching, mostly kept up appearances. Laundry day became a family spectacle, with sheets draped in chilly parlours and hope hanging thicker than steam. Children were polished for church, adults wore gloves in public, and everyone became expert at strategic dabbing, dusting, and the deployment of scented handkerchiefs. But as the century progressed, science began to sneak in through the cracks in the marble. The rise of public health campaigns, spurred by revolting outbreaks and the collective trauma of the Great Stink, eventually brought indoor plumbing, regular bathing, and the radical notion that clean hands actually prevented disease. Germ theory crept from lecture halls into drawing rooms, where it met stiff resistance from old-school matrons and the Queen's own advisors, who still believed in the moral power of a brisk towel rub and a little brandy. Still, Victoria's influence was not all bad news for hygiene. Her own anxieties about miasmas and bad airs led to better ventilation, improved sewer systems, and an arms race of floral fragrances that eventually made modern deodorant seem like a blessed miracle. The Queen herself championed cleanliness as an act of national pride. One could conquer half the world, but heaven forbid a guest spot a speck of dust on the drawing-room piano. Yet, the true legacy of Victorian hygiene is in its contradictions. This was an era that championed soap while fearing water, that wore 6 layers to guard against cold and scandal, and that regarded the body as something to be constantly restrained, powdered, perfumed, and above all, hidden. Public baths were rare, but public judgments were not. The average person might bathe a few times a year, but the hope was that etiquette, perfume, and a good breeze would cover the rest. By the time the Queen's descendants were shooing away Edwardian dust bunnies, the world had changed. Hot showers, toothpaste, and flush toilets had become not just aspirations but expectations. Modernity had finally caught up with the myth of Victorian cleanliness, and with it, the realization that surviving the age of corsets, coal, and annual baths required more than a stiff upper lip. It demanded a sense of humour, a willingness to adapt, and perhaps above all, an excellent glove collection. So tonight, As you turn on the hot tap and marvel at the scent of lemon-fresh detergent, remember the legacy of Queen Victoria. Her impact lingers in every drawer of extra linens, every decorative handkerchief, and every sigh of relief when laundry day comes more than once a year. For better or worse, we are all a little bit Victorian, just with fewer bloomers and a lot more soap. Soap in the Victorian era was not exactly the luxury spa experience you're picturing. The Queen's favourite blend was a rough, lumpy bar made of animal fat, lye, and a whisper of lavender, if the royal budget allowed. Using it was less a cleansing ritual and more a test of endurance. It left your skin squeaky, slightly pink, and vaguely smelling like yesterday's roast dinner. Let's travel back to the palace bathroom, where you, a loyal attendant, are presented with a chunky rectangle that looks like it could double as a doorstop. This, you are assured, is the good soap, a rare upgrade from the plain brown variety issued to lesser mortals. Its corners are worn to sharp points, and the surface is faintly mottled with streaks of something that might once have been flower petals or might just be mystery residue. It is, you are told, Queen Victoria's favourite, though this is a bit like calling leeches the favourite cure for fever. The process of using the soap is as follows. Wet a linen cloth. Never your bare hands, unless you're feeling particularly rebellious. Rub it vigorously on the bar until it lathers, or, more realistically, until you give up and decide that a thin, greyish film counts as clean. The scent that wafts up is not exactly spa day. There's a definite note of beef tallow, with an afterthought of lye, and just the faintest, desperately optimistic hint of lavender, like a distant memory of a summer's day. Victorian soap is not gentle. The lye, caustic soda derived from wood ash, does the heavy lifting, stripping away everything from dirt to your sense of optimism. After a thorough scrubbing, your skin feels tight, raw, and strangely squeaky, like a freshly washed plate. The Queen is famously stoic, accepting the burn and the lingering scent of roast beast with floral garnish as simply the price of being clean in an age that viewed frequent bathing with suspicion. Of course, the soap's harshness has certain advantages. It is spectacularly effective at removing ink, stains, grass, and any sense of personal dignity. It's rumoured that a brisk wash with the Queen's preferred bar could rid a person of both germs and lingering bad moods, simply by sheer force of chemical irritation. In fact, if your skin is left pink and tingling, you know you've done it right. If it starts to peel, you might even receive a congratulatory nod from the royal physician. The rest of the royal family, naturally, has opinions on the soap. Some prefer softer French imports, creamy and lightly perfumed, but these are considered suspiciously decadent, best reserved for foreign guests or especially delicate children. Queen Victoria's choice is all about British fortitude, practical, robust, and capable of dissolving both Victorian dirt and Victorian illusions. Washing with this soap is not an everyday affair. In keeping with the era's attitude toward personal hygiene, soap is used sparingly and always rinsed away with icy water, which leaves you with an invigorating shiver and a renewed sense of self-preservation. Towels are rough and only marginally absorbent, ensuring that any excess oil your skin might have retained is a distant memory by bedtime. Storage of the royal soap is its own production. Bars are kept in locked cupboards, away from prying eyes and overly ambitious maids. On laundry day, shavings are scraped off to be dissolved in boiling water for the bedsheets, turning even the task of clean linens into a lesson in endurance. So next time you reach for your bottle of triple-milled body wash, or complain that your moisturizer isn't luxurious enough, spare a thought for Queen Victoria and her formidable bar of soap. For her, cleanliness was not about pampering, but perseverance, a twice-weekly ritual of scrubbing away the world, one tallow-scented swipe at a time. If you emerged slightly pink, smelling faintly of beef stew and wildflowers, congratulations, you survived the Victorian clean. Running water in Buckingham Palace was a marvel of Victorian engineering, which is to say, it mostly worked if you bribed the right footman. Pipes clanged, faucets groaned, and mysterious drips echoed through the royal corridors at all hours. If you wanted a warm bath, you'd better start negotiating with the staff and the plumbing at least 3 hours in advance, and keep a mop handy for the inevitable flood. Let's enter the Grand Palace, where beneath the gilded ceilings and marble statues, a labyrinth of pipes snakes through the walls like the world's least reliable nervous system. The Victorians prided themselves on innovation, and nowhere was this more evident or more hazardous than in their efforts to bring modern plumbing to royal life. Early systems involved gravity-fed tanks, lead pipes, and a kind of wishful optimism that only a true Victorian could muster. A morning in the palace might start with the sound of water hammering somewhere in the distance, followed by a faint shouting match between two footmen, and then the unmistakable clank of a reluctant faucet finally deciding to cooperate. If you are Queen Victoria, a warm bath is an event that requires a coordinated staff effort and more planning than most military campaigns. Water must be heated in basement cauldrons, then ferried up by the bucket, unless, of course, the newfangled boiler is working, in which case, everyone offers up a prayer to the gods of steam and pipe. The plumbing's temperament is legendary. Faucets are either stingy, providing a thin dribble, or over-enthusiastic, unleashing a tidal wave at precisely the wrong moment. Pipes rattle ominously during state dinners, and servants learn quickly to identify the different plumbing personalities in each wing of the palace. There's the optimistic corridor, where you might get warm water by lunchtime, and the melancholic hall, where a drip turns into a deluge at the worst possible hour. And if the Queen is visiting another royal residence, all bets are off. Each palace has its own plumbing mood swings. Then there are the floods. The palace floors have seen more water than the gardens outside. Overflowing cisterns, leaky joints, and the occasional burst pipe send staff scrambling for mops, buckets, and, if things get dire, the royal plumber, whose appearance is usually accompanied by a faint smell of gin and a resigned expression. The Queen herself, while generally above the fray, has been known to summon a footman with the words, "There appears to be a river under my chaise longue." The response is always the same, "Right away, Your Majesty," followed by panicked splashing in the corridor. Toilets, or water closets, are still a relatively new concept. Their introduction to Buckingham Palace is met with a mixture of curiosity and dread. Early models have pull chains that sometimes refuse to work, or work too well, sending water splashing halfway up the wall and giving the corgis an unexpected shower. Instructions are passed down from one bewildered attendant to the next. Pull gently, wait for the gurgle, and never, ever flush during a royal audience. Despite the frustrations, palace plumbing is a source of great pride. Guests marvel at the modern conveniences, never guessing how many people are required to keep them functioning, or how many disasters have been averted by quick-thinking staff armed with towels and discretion. A well-timed flush or a working hot tap is a minor miracle, and when it all goes smoothly, there's a palpable sense of triumph in the servants' hall. The Queen, for her part, maintains a dignified distance from most plumbing woes, content to let her staff do battle with the pipes. But every so often, even she cannot escape the realities of Victorian progress. On particularly memorable nights, she retires to bed with a sigh, her bathwater lukewarm, her floors just a bit damp, and her dreams haunted by the faint, rhythmic dripping of Buckingham Palace's most persistent resident. So, next time you turn on a tap and receive a reliable stream of hot water, take a moment to appreciate the marvel that is modern plumbing. In Queen Victoria's day, every bath, every flush, and every gurgling faucet was a leap of faith, a royal flush or a royal fail, depending on the mood of the pipes and the luck of the draw. Each layer of royal underclothing was a new habitat for Victorian bacteria. Petticoats were rarely washed and often aired out by simply waving them in a drafty hallway. If you got a rash, well, that was just character building. When smallpox swept through the palace, the staff blamed bad air. Not the unwashed layers, definitely not. Let's take a peek behind the royal screens, where the business of petticoats and personal hygiene is a palace-wide project in wishful thinking. Every morning, Queen Victoria is layered up with care, chemise, drawers, corset, several petticoats, and a skirt so voluminous it deserves its own postal code. These undergarments are crafted from the finest cotton, linen, and sometimes silk, but their beauty is fleeting. After a single wear, a petticoat is a sponge for sweat, dust, coal, soot, and whatever the royal corgis tracked through the corridor. The problem? Washing these layers is a Herculean task, even for an army of maids. Laundry day is a rare and special occasion. Think of it as a solar eclipse, but with more lye soap and less celebration. Water must be heated, garments scrubbed on rough boards, and fabric wrung out by hand. Royal petticoats, heavy and awkward, risk shrinking, fraying, or simply disintegrating under such abuse. So, the practical solution: avoid washing as long as possible. Instead, servants hang petticoats on lines strung between open windows, waving them in the chilly British air like surrender flags. A brisk breeze is said to refresh the fabric, which really just redistributes the aroma. Of course, all those layers are perfect breeding grounds for bacteria and other microscopic mischief makers. It's not uncommon for the Queen, or anyone in her orbit, to develop a rash, an itch, or a mysterious collection of red spots. These are treated as a mark of resilience. A little chafing is nothing compared to the glory of modesty and decorum. Talcum powder is dusted on with reckless abandon, attempting to keep dampness and scandal at bay. When illness strikes, as it did during the various smallpox outbreaks of the era, the palace staff springs into action. The blame is placed squarely on bad air, miasmas rising up from the Thames, or an unlucky breeze blowing in from the city. The idea that anything living in the folds of a petticoat could be the culprit is dismissed outright. After all, these are royal petticoats, surely above reproach, if not actual cleaning. Doctors of the era recommend all sorts of alarming remedies for persistent skin complaints: mustard poultices, vinegar washes, and the application of mysterious ointments that are mostly lard with a pinch of lavender. Meanwhile, the Queen's ladies-in-waiting swap home remedies and quietly compete to see who can air out the most layers in a single afternoon without causing a diplomatic incident. If a rash persists, it is explained away as sensitivity to weather, overexertion at a ball, or, in the Queen's case, the weight of empire. The real danger, of course, lurks in the invisible world. Fleas, lice, and other unwanted guests are common companions, despite everyone's best efforts. Regular inspections are conducted, combs and powders are deployed, and the odd petticoat is sent off for emergency laundering if the situation turns dire. But for the most part, everyone muddles through, comforted by the knowledge that at least their neighbours are suffering the same fate, and that modesty is preserved, if not actual cleanliness. By the time the palace turns in for the night, petticoats are aired, hands are powdered, and the cycle of hopeful hygiene begins again. If someone develops a fever, the windows are closed, prayers are said, and a special draught is brought up from the kitchen, a little brandy, and a lot of optimism. So next time you drop your laundry in a modern washing machine, to be grateful you don't have to refresh your underclothes in a drafty hallway, or wonder if your rash is character building, or just a polite way of saying please wash me. In Queen Victoria's world, petticoats and pox went hand in hand, and the real secret of palace hygiene was a strong constitution and an even stronger sense of denial. So tonight, as you drift off in your fresh pajamas, on a bed that smells like detergent instead of historic mystery, spare a soft thought for Queen Victoria and her army of well-meaning but bewildered attendants. The struggle for cleanliness was real, relentless, and in its own way heroic. Every mist bath, every corset that never quite dried, every rose-scented handkerchief waved against the onslaught of Victorian fragrance, it was all just part of being alive, royal, and ever so slightly musty. As you listen to the quiet hum of your fan or the gentle tick of a digital clock, remember that for most of history, Surviving the day was about compromise. A little perfume here, a lot of denial there, and enough layers to make even the bravest germ reconsider. Queen Victoria's hygiene regime was less about luxury and more about stubbornness, about holding the line against dirt with lavender sachets and the unbreakable power of tradition. So be grateful for hot showers, laundry machines, toothbrushes that don't contain bone dust, and a culture that frowns on annual baths. When you tuck yourself in tonight, you're not just getting comfortable. You're honoring a long lineage of people who did the best they could with what they had, and who probably wished for indoor plumbing with every fibre of their slightly unwashed being. Because history may be gross and sometimes horrifying, but it's proof that people are endlessly adaptable, impossibly hopeful, and more than a little ridiculous. You made it through another night of absurd old history, and you did it smelling fresh. Good night. May your dreams be as peaceful as a royal nap, and far, far cleaner.